I always thought danger came from the outside, from strangers, from dark streets, from locked doors, but the night I heard the basement latch slam shut above my head, I learned danger can wear the face of your own child. The air down there was cold, damp, and too quiet. My hands shook as I searched for the pull chain light, my breathing bouncing off the concrete walls. And then I heard his footsteps walking away. My son. The same boy I raised with Sunday prayers, warm biscuits, and hand-me-down love. Behind me, my husband reached for my wrist, his voice barely a breath against the darkness. Quiet. I have a secret. That whisper didn't calm me. It chilled me. Because if the man I trusted with my whole life had been keeping a secret this big, then whatever waited for us upstairs wasn't just betrayal. It was a truth powerful enough to break a family in half. I didn't know the sound of a lock could break a mother's heart, but when that basement door slammed shut above my head, hard enough to shake dust from the beams, something deep inside me cracked. For a moment I stood there, staring into the shadows, waiting for footsteps to come back, waiting for my son to say, "Sorry, Mama, wrong door." But the only footsteps I heard were moving away. Fast. Determined. "Marcus," I called, forcing my voice to hold steady. "Sweetheart, open the door. This isn't funny." Silence. Then the faint murmur of voices, his low, frustrated tone, and my daughter-in-law's sharp whisper, drifting through the floorboards. I pressed my palm to the cold wood of the door, the grain poking into my skin like tiny needles. I listened harder. Drawers opening, papers rustling. Footsteps crossing the hallway upstairs. They weren't checking on us. They were searching for something. A chill crept up my spine. The basement was cold, colder than usual, its concrete floor sending a damp ache through my knees. The smell of old paint cans, rusting tools, and decades of stored memories clung to the air. I felt the walls tighten around me as if the house itself knew something was wrong. Behind me, Charles steadied me with a hand on my back. His touch was warm, but his eyes were tracking every sound, like a man who already knew we were in danger. "Charles," I whispered, "why would he lock us down here? What did we do?" He didn't answer. He just glanced toward the far corner, the one we never talked about, the spot where he kept old banker's boxes from his parents' estate, boxes even Marcus wasn't allowed to touch. I saw something shift across his face. Not fear, resolve. Upstairs, something heavy thudded against the floor. Then our daughter-in-law's voice cut through the house like a blade. "Hurry up. They can't stay down there forever." My chest tightened. They. Not Mom, not Dad. Just they. I had raised Marcus on prayers, biscuits, gospel music, and grit. I held him through fevers, worked double shifts so he could go to community college, co-signed loans when his business dream nearly collapsed. And now here I was, locked in my own basement like an unwanted guest in the house I helped pay for. My throat tightened, a burn rising behind my eyes. I didn't want to believe it, but their footsteps, their whispers, their urgency, none of it felt like an accident. "What are they doing?" I asked quietly. Charles moved closer, his voice barely above the hum of the old furnace. "They're looking for something I never told them about." I blinked at him. "Something you never told me about either?" The basement light flickered overhead, casting shaky shadows across the walls. Charles lowered his head, his brow furrowing the way it used to when he had something heavy on his mind, like when he decided to leave his job or when we nearly lost the house years ago. Then he leaned in, placing his lips close to my ear. "Quiet," he breathed. A pause thick enough to taste. "I have a secret." The words didn't comfort me. They wrapped around me like cold smoke. A secret big enough for our son to lock us away? A secret dangerous enough to make my husband this calm? My pulse hammered. "Charles, what secret? What's going on?" He looked toward the staircase again, listening, measuring, waiting for the next sound above us. The footsteps had stopped. The house had gone still. Too still. Finally, he turned back to me, eyes steady, jaw set. "We're not trapped," he whispered. "They are. They just don't know it yet." In that moment, the basement didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like the first move in a game my husband had been preparing for far longer than I realized. Before that basement door locked behind us, my life looked ordinary, maybe even peaceful, in the way a calm lake looks peaceful right before a storm breaks the surface. I'm 64 years old, born and raised in Norfolk, Virginia. I've spent most of my life in kitchens, church pews, and community centers, doing what Black mothers have done for generations, holding a family together with prayer, grit, and whatever spare change God allows to fall into our pockets. For years, our home was simple but warm. A 2-story house with creaking steps, a screened porch Charles built with his own hands, and a maple tree out front that turned the whole yard gold every October. Charles and I have lived here since Reagan was president. We survived job loss, recession, medical bills, and the long stretch of nights where we wondered how we'd cover the mortgage. But we made it. Because we had each other. And we had Marcus. Marcus wasn't a perfect child, no son is, but he was ours. He was that little boy who used to crawl into our bed after thunderstorms, who wore his church shoes even after service because he liked the way they made him feel grown, who cried the day his grandfather died and said, "Mama, I'll take care of you when I'm older." I held on to that promise for decades. When Marcus grew up, he became ambitious, determined. He studied business, worked at a local bank, then moved up to a credit union. Charles and I were proud. A Black man doing well in finance? In our neighborhood, that was a blessing you didn't take for granted. We bragged about him at potlucks, at church, even to the mailman. When he met Tasha, the woman who would later lock eyes with him as he locked us in the basement, I wanted to love her. I tried. She was charming in that bright, polished way, always dressed sharp, nails perfectly done, smile wide enough to hide anything she didn't want us to see. At first, I thought she simply came from a different world. Later, I realized she wasn't different. She was calculating. But back then, I welcomed her into my family with open arms. After they got married, Marcus asked if they could move in with us, just for a little while so they could save money. I said yes without hesitation. That's what mothers do. We give. We make room. We shift our entire lives to make space for our children's dreams. They moved into the upstairs bedroom with the bay window, the one I had decorated for Marcus when he was 10. Tasha wanted to repaint it gray, said the yellow was too sentimental. I tried not to take it personally, but something in me flinched. Little by little, things shifted. Marcus stopped joining us for breakfast. Tasha started moving my kitchen items to different cabinets, for efficiency. Our grocery bills doubled even though I barely ate, and Charles noticed money disappearing from one of our joint accounts. At the time, I brushed it all off. Young folks have their own ways, I told Charles. They're just figuring life out. But late at night, when the house was quiet, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, feeling a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. Then came the first real sign. One Sunday afternoon, I overheard Tasha talking on the phone in the hallway. She thought I was outside watering plants. "He doesn't need to know," she hissed. "Once the paperwork is done, everything moves to my name anyway." My heart skipped. Whose name? What paperwork? I stepped back before she saw me, my pulse racing. I didn't want to believe she was talking about us, about our home, about the very thing Charles and I had spent 30 years building. Still, I kept quiet, because mothers always assume the best, even when the truth is staring them straight in the face. A week later, Marcus started locking his office door. He never did that growing up. He never hid anything from me. But suddenly he was hiding everything. Then came the bank statements. The withdrawals we didn't authorize, the strange charges, the missing paperwork from our fireproof box. Charles noticed first. He said nothing, but I watched him change. Quiet, observant, watching every move Marcus made. He kept his questions to himself. Charles has always been the calm one, the thinker, the man who doesn't raise his voice but never misses a thing. I didn't know then what he knew. I didn't know what he had already found. I didn't know why he waited. But now, looking back, all the little moments make sense. Every whisper upstairs, every locked drawer, every tense glance between Marcus and Tasha, every time Charles stepped into the garage to take a moment. The storm had been building for months. We just didn't know the thunder would fall on us in the form of a locked basement door. It didn't happen all at once. Evil rarely walks through the front door wearing a name tag. It slips in quietly, through sideways glances, mismatched stories, a tone that doesn't match the words. The first sign arrived on a Wednesday morning. I was standing at the kitchen sink washing collard greens for dinner when Marcus walked in. He looked different. Not upset, not tired. Just distracted in a way I couldn't place. "Morning, baby," I said, wiping my hands on a towel. He didn't answer, not even a nod. He walked straight to the coffee maker, poured himself a cup, then stood leaning on the counter like he was thinking hard about something He didn't want to say out loud. I tried again. You all right? He flinched, not big, not obvious, but enough for a mother to catch it. Then he forced a smile. Yeah, Ma, just busy. Busy. That was his new word for everything. I didn't press. But when he walked away, I noticed something that stopped me cold. He had a key in his hand. Not a house key, not a car key. A small, silver safe key I hadn't seen in years. The kind we used for our old lockbox before we moved to a digital safe. But that safe key should have been gone. Charles threw it out when we upgraded, at least. I thought he did. I wiped my hands again, this time slower, the towel suddenly feeling heavy. Was he going through our things? Did he find something he wasn't supposed to? Before I could ask, Tasha floated into the kitchen like she owned the place. Her perfume hit the air first, something expensive, too sweet and heavy for early morning. She slid next to Marcus, placed a hand on his shoulder, and gave me a smile so polished it could have been lacquered. Morning, Mama J, she said. We might have some papers for you to look at soon. Financial papers. Just like that. No explanation, no context. I must have looked confused because she laughed lightly and added, Don't stress, just grown-up stuff. I've lived 64 years. I've worked, raised a child, buried parents, survived medical bills and near foreclosures. Grown-up stuff didn't scare me. But the way she said it, that scared me a little. After breakfast, I went to the porch to water my plants, my little sanctuary, and found something odd. The mail was already brought in, but the mailbox had clearly been opened earlier. Charles hadn't touched it. I hadn't touched it. Someone else had. I didn't say anything. I just felt a cold twist in my stomach. Then came the next sign. Our neighbor, Miss Loretta, a retired nurse who knows everybody's business and pretends she doesn't, stopped me during my afternoon walk. You all right, honey? She asked, squinting at me over her sunglasses. I'm fine, I answered, though my voice wobbled. Loretta leaned in. I ain't trying to meddle, but your boy and that wife of his were in the pharmacy the other day, whispering about something they needed before Friday. When I walked past, they shut up real fast. Before Friday. That phrase stuck in my mind like a splinter. That night, I sat in bed reading when I heard hushed voices downstairs. I couldn't make out the words, just tension, quick breaths, movements like people packing or searching for something. I eased toward the door and quietly opened it. The hallway was dark except for the faint glow under Marcus and Tasha's bedroom door. I heard her voice first. It has to be here. His parents are old school. They wouldn't put everything digital. Then Marcus. And if we don't find it? Her reply was sharp enough to cut through the air. Then we make them sign new documents, one way or another. A cold wave washed over me. They weren't talking about chores or bills. They were talking about our possessions, our assets, our future. I took a step back, careful not to let the floorboards creak. My breath shook as I closed my bedroom door again. Charles looked up from the edge of the bed. You heard them, didn't you? I nodded. He exhaled slowly, rubbing his hands together as if preparing for something. I wanted to ask if he knew more, but he shook his head before I could speak. Not yet, he whispered, just watch. So I watched. I watched as Marcus started coming home later, smelling like stress and secrets. I watched as Tasha deleted voicemails the moment the phone rang. I watched as bills disappeared from the kitchen counter before I could read them. I watched as they avoided eye contact with me, with Charles, with each other, like two people tangled in a plan too messy to control. The signs weren't small anymore. They were everywhere. Loud, bold, sharp-edged, and each one whispered the same warning. Something was coming. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind that should have smelled like peach cobbler and gospel music drifting from the radio. Instead, the house felt wrong, quiet in a way that pressed on my ears. Charles had gone out to pick up a part for the lawnmower. Marcus and Tasha were running errands, though I'd come to learn that meant anything but. I was alone. I don't know what made me walk into the hallway closet. Maybe instinct, maybe fear, maybe the Holy Spirit whispering, look. Whatever it was, I slid the door open and began sorting through the stacks of old coats and storage bins. Then I saw it. A piece of white paper, crumpled near the bottom shelf. Something about the way it was stuffed behind an old shoe made my stomach tighten. I reached for it, smoothed the wrinkles with my thumb, and read the first line. Transfer authorization. Urgent property title request. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands shook as I scanned the page. It had our address, our names, a section labeled Signature Required. And the worst part, the part that made bile rise in my throat, someone had already signed Charles's name. But it wasn't his signature, not even close. It looked rushed, sloppy, imitated. I staggered backward, hitting the wall with my shoulder. The paper fluttered in my hand like it was alive, like it carried a heartbeat of its own, one that matched the fear pounding in my chest. Before I could think, I heard the front door open. I froze. Footsteps, 2 pairs. Coming inside, I stuffed the paper inside my sweater, held it close to my ribs, and stepped quietly into the living room. Marcus and Tasha were unloading grocery bags, their faces tight with some unspoken tension. Tasha spotted me first. "Oh, Mama J, you scared me." I forced a smile. "Just tidying up." Marcus didn't look at me. He set the bags down and immediately walked to his office, locking the door behind him, a habit that now screamed danger. I went upstairs, heart racing, and slipped into my bedroom. I shut the door softly and leaned against it, letting the quiet swallow me. With trembling fingers, I pulled the paper from my sweater and read it again. Every line felt like a betrayal carved in ink. Charles hadn't mentioned anything about transferring property. He would never sign away our home. And even if he had, why would the papers be hidden behind an old rain boot? I sat on the bed, breathing slow, trying to steady my thoughts. Then I heard something. A whisper. At first I thought it was the house settling. Old houses talk, and ours had lived long enough to hold its own memories. But the whisper grew clearer. "Find the documents before she does." My heart lurched. It was Tasha's voice. Coming from the hallway, she was on the phone. "I told you, she's too trusting. We'll get what we need. We just have to make sure they sign before the end of the month." I felt my stomach twist. End of the month. That phrase again, deadlines, urgency, pressure. What were they planning? I stepped away from the door and moved deeper into the room, hiding the document under the mattress. My space. Somewhere only Charles or I would look. Then a memory surfaced, one that struck me harder than a slap. 3 nights earlier, I'd found the digital safe slightly open, just a crack. Not enough to notice if you weren't looking. At the time, I thought maybe Charles forgot to close it. But now, the truth slid over me like ice water. They were searching the house. They weren't just rummaging. They were hunting. Later that evening, I sat with Charles on the porch, letting the warm Virginia dusk wrap around us. Cicadas hummed their summer song. It should have been a peaceful moment. Instead, my chest felt tight with dread. "I found something today," I whispered. He looked at me, eyes narrowing. "What did you find?" I told him everything. The closet, the document, the forged signature, the phone call. When I finished, Charles didn't gasp. He didn't turn pale. He didn't even look surprised. He simply sighed, a long, heavy exhale, and rubbed his forehead. "I was afraid of that," he said quietly. Afraid. Not shocked. Not confused. Afraid. I stared at him, my pulse thundering. "Charles, why aren't you surprised? What do you know?" He looked out over the yard, the sunset painting his face in a deep orange glow. His jaw tensed, and for a long moment he said nothing. Then, without looking at me, he murmured, "The forged signature isn't the first thing they tried. It's just the first thing you found." The world seemed to tilt. I gripped the armrest, the porch spinning around me. "What do you mean?" I whispered. He finally turned to me, eyes steady, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw the weight he'd been carrying. "They're deeper into this than you think," he said. "Much deeper." And that was the moment I understood. The paper I found wasn't the beginning. It was the first thread in a web we hadn't seen yet, a web tightening around us day by day. Revelation rarely arrives politely. It doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for an invitation. It bursts in, unannounced, ripping away whatever innocence you've been holding on to. For me, it came on a humid Sunday night, the kind where the heat sits heavy on your skin even after sunset. Charles had gone to bed early. My heart was too restless to follow, so I wandered downstairs for a glass of water. The house was dark except for the faint glow slipping out from under Marcus's office door. I froze at the bottom of the stairs. That office, my old sewing room, had become a vault of secrets lately. A locked vault. Something told me not to move, not to make a sound. Then I heard it. Marcus's voice. Low, frantic. The kind of tone he'd never used in front of me growing up. The voice of a man cornered by his own mistakes. "We're running out of time, Tasha," he snapped. "The bank wants proof by the end of the month." Tasha hissed back, "Then we need the house. We can't secure the loan without it." I pressed my hand to the wall, my breath trapped in my throat. Loan? House? They weren't talking about groceries, bills, or some simple confusion. They were talking about our home, the one place Charles and I had poured our entire lives into. Marcus continued, pacing by the sound of it. "If my parents sign the transfer, everything gets approved. The bank doesn't care who owns it, they just want collateral." Collateral. The word slapped me across the face. Our home wasn't a home to them, it was leverage. Tasha's heels clicked sharply across the hardwood. "What if your mom asks questions? She's been snooping." My blood went cold. Marcus scoffed. "She's harmless. Old people get curious. And besides, Dad's the one we need. If he signs, it's done." Harmless. Old. I had cooked that boy hundreds of meals, sat by his bed when he had pneumonia, cried with him when he didn't get into his first choice college, and now I was harmless. I clutched the banister, my hand trembling. Tasha lowered her voice again. "We found most of the paperwork. But something's missing. His parents have more than we thought. There's supposed to be another file. Charles's father's estate, stocks, bonds, titles." Marcus cursed under his breath. "If we don't find it, we'll never know how much we can pull." Pull? Like we were resources? Not human beings, not parents, just assets. Tasha must have moved closer because her next words were sharp enough to make me flinch. "Then we make them sign everything. Whatever they don't own on paper, we take legally. Once they're gone—" "Gone?" Marcus cut in. "Yes," she insisted. "They're not young, Marcus. They don't need a big house. We'll move them into senior living, tell everyone they wanted something smaller." My chest tightened with a kind of pain I didn't know existed. Not heartbreak, something deeper. Like the ground beneath me had given way. Marcus whispered, "Do you think they'll resist?" Tasha scoffed. "Your mother? She folds the second someone raises their voice. And your dad? He's too tired to fight." Too tired? Charles, the man who had built our porch with his bare hands, who had worked double shifts for years to keep us afloat, was too tired? I bit down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. Marcus's voice came next, quieter. "We need them gone before the audit, and before they realize the withdrawals weren't authorized." My hand flew to my mouth. Withdrawals. Unauthorized. Withdrawals. The missing money Charles had mentioned, the strange transactions. Marcus wasn't borrowing it. He was stealing it. Tasha sighed dramatically. "We just have to get through this month. Then everything will be ours. The house, the yard, their accounts. Ours, not his, not shared. Theirs." My vision blurred. I staggered backward, the wooden step creaking beneath me. Instantly, the voices inside fell silent. I held my breath, standing completely still, praying the darkness swallowed me whole. Then Marcus's voice pierced the silence. "Did you hear that?" My heart flipped. Tasha whispered urgently, "Check." Footsteps, moving fast. I backed down the stairs as quietly as I could, slipping behind the corner of the hallway. My breath came in shallow bursts, my palms sweating, my whole body shaking. The office door swung open. Marcus stepped out, scanning the living room, eyes moving like a predator's. He looked older in that moment, harsher, colder, like a stranger wearing my son's face. Tasha stood behind him, arms crossed, jaw clenched. After a few seconds, Marcus muttered, "Probably nothing." I didn't breathe until their footsteps retreated and the office door closed again. I sank onto the bottom step, my knees weak. My chest ached like someone had reached inside and squeezed. How long had this been happening? How long had my own son been plotting against us? And what hurt most wasn't the plan. It wasn't even the lies. It was realizing he didn't hesitate. Not once. Not for a second. He chose this willingly. Later that night, when the house finally fell into uneasy silence, I slipped into our bedroom and shut the door behind me. Charles was awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was waiting for a verdict. "Charles," I whispered, voice cracking, "I heard everything." He lifted his head slowly. "Everything?" I nodded, tears spilling freely now. The loan, the house, the signatures, the files. They're planning to put us in senior living. My voice broke. I pressed a hand to my chest. They called us harmless, tired. Marcus. I swallowed hard. Marcus said we'd be gone soon. Charles closed his eyes, a muscle in his jaw twitching. I know, he murmured. The word tore out of me. You know? His silence was the confirmation. How long? I demanded, my voice rising despite myself. How long have you known? Charles didn't flinch. He just looked at me, the kind of look a man gives when he's holding the weight of something he regrets but cannot undo. Long enough, he said quietly. Long enough to realize this isn't just greed. It's desperation. Desperation? Such a small word for such a monstrous betrayal. He continued, voice steady but heavy, and long enough to know we can't confront them without proof. My hands balled into fists. Charles, they're using us. They want everything we own. He reached for my hand, gripping it with a firmness that steadied me. I know. But listen to me. We're not going to lose this house, and we're not going to be pushed out of our own lives. His voice dropped to a whisper, the same whisper he would later use in that dark basement when he said, I have a secret. I already have a plan. The floor beneath me seemed to shift. A plan? A secret? Something big enough to keep hidden from me? Before I could ask more, he squeezed my hand again, gently, but with a weight I wasn't used to. We're going to stop them, he said softly, but we have to let this play out just a little longer. And in that moment, through the ache and the betrayal and the shaking inside my bones, one truth settled into place. This wasn't just a family problem anymore. This was a trap, one they had set for us. But they didn't realize they had walked into one too. People think the worst kind of heartbreak comes from losing a spouse or a friend or a long-time job. But the deepest ache, the one that hollows you out, is realizing your own child is capable of hurting you. After what I heard that night, something inside me collapsed. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I didn't even cry at first. I just sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the pattern on the carpet, the same carpet Marcus used to crawl on as a toddler, and felt pieces of myself slide away one by one. Charles sat beside me silent. He didn't touch me at first. He knew I was sinking, and he gave me space to fall, because sometimes falling is the only way to understand where the ground truly is. The house was quiet upstairs, but my mind wasn't. Every memory of Marcus flashed through me like a slideshow someone was fast-forwarding, too quickly. His first steps, his first day of school, the night he cried after he lost the middle school spelling bee, the way he hugged me when he graduated, and then, like a cold blade through warm memories, came the sound of his voice from earlier. They're old. They won't fight this. They don't need the house. We move them into senior living. Those words replayed over and over until they no longer sounded like Marcus. They sounded like a stranger impersonating him. When the tears finally came, they came hard. Not loud. I didn't wail or scream, but they were heavy, shaking, unstoppable. Tears that carried 30 years of motherhood with them. Charles placed his hand on my back, rubbing small circles the way he always did when life hurt more than it should. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't see it sooner. He shook his head. Don't blame yourself. But how could I not? I had raised him, loved him, shielded him, trusted him, and he had turned all of that into ammunition. The guilt tasted bitter on my tongue, like I was the one who'd failed, not Marcus. I whispered, was I too soft on him? Too protective? Charles sighed. You were being a mother. But maybe I should have been more firm, I said, voice cracking. Maybe if I'd taught him better values. No. Charles looked at me with steady eyes. This is not your fault. But in that moment, I didn't believe him. I felt small, old, tired in my bones. I walked to the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. The fluorescent light flickered, making my reflection shiver. I studied the lines on my face, lines formed from decades of smiling, worrying, surviving. But now they looked like cracks on an old vase someone had decided wasn't worth keeping anymore. My voice was barely a whisper. How did we get here? No answer came. I splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't help. The ache was too deep. When I came back to the bedroom, Charles was sitting where I left him, elbows on his knees. He looked older than I remembered, but not defeated. Not like me? Not yet. I feel like a fool, I whispered. Like I raised a snake and never saw its fangs. Charles flinched slightly, but he didn't disagree. That hurt more than agreement would have. People change, he said carefully. No, I corrected, shaking my head. People reveal. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Finally, I lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Marcus's face, but twisted, blurred, replaced by the voice I'd heard through the office door. Cold, calculating, impatient. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft, cautious, intentional. I held my breath. For a moment, I wondered if he knew I had overheard everything. If he was checking to see how much we'd discovered. The footsteps paused near our bedroom door. My chest tightened. I gripped Charles's hand under the blankets. Then, after a long 10 seconds, the footsteps drifted away. When the house finally settled back into stillness, Charles whispered, "We need to be careful now." That sentence cracked something new inside me. My own son was now someone we needed to be cautious around. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. The kind that's not physical, but soul deep. Like the weight of betrayal was pressing down on my ribs, making it hard to breathe. I shut my eyes and whispered a prayer I never thought I'd have to say. God, protect me from my own child. The moment those words left my lips, I cried again. Quiet, broken tears soaking into the pillow, because that prayer should never exist. And yet, there I was, saying it. Somewhere in the house, a floorboard creaked. I didn't know if it was the old wood settling or Marcus moving again. Either way, the danger didn't feel outside anymore. It was inside, under our roof, sharing our walls, walking our floors. And for the first time in my whole life, I realized I wasn't just afraid of losing my home. I was afraid of losing myself. I woke up the next morning with that same pit in my stomach, the heavy, dragging kind that tells you the nightmare didn't end while you slept. It simply waited. The house felt too still, too watchful. I could hear Marcus moving around upstairs, doors opening and closing, the soft thump of something being dragged across the floor. Searching, always searching. I sat at the edge of the bed for a long minute before Charles spoke. "Don't move yet," he murmured. His voice was low, steady, not shaken like mine still was. There was something in his tone, a quiet authority I hadn't heard in years. I turned to him. "Charles, what are you not telling me?" He exhaled slowly, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Then he got up, walked to the dresser, and opened the bottom drawer, the one he rarely touched. From deep inside, he pulled out a small black case, rectangular, metal, heavy. I'd never seen it before. "What is that?" I whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he locked our bedroom door, something he hadn't done in decades, then sat beside me, placing the case on the bed between us. "Before my father died," he said quietly, "he gave me something he didn't trust anyone else to hold, not even Marcus." My brow furrowed. "Your father?" "That was over 15 years ago." He nodded. "And I've kept his instructions ever since." Charles opened the case slowly, carefully, like something inside might bite. Inside was a slim flash drive, a stack of old legal documents, several envelopes sealed with wax, yes, wax, and a small notebook filled with my father-in-law's handwriting. I stared. "What is all this?" Charles didn't hesitate. "This is why Marcus and Tasha will never get this house, or anything else. Not unless I let them." I blinked, confusion and shock tangling inside me. "But they've already found so much. They've been going through everything." "Everything except what matters," Charles said, "because what matters has always been with me." He picked up the flash drive between two fingers, holding it carefully. "This," he said, "is a financial record of everything my father left behind. Stocks, bonds, land deeds, even accounts Marcus never knew existed." I gasped softly. "And the notebook?" I asked. Charles opened it to a page marked with a red tab. I leaned in. Handwritten entries filled the paper, dates, names, and notes about transactions going back decades. My breath caught. Because next to one of the entries, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "For my son Charles, never for Marcus." My eyes stung. Why wouldn't he want Marcus to have it? Charles looked at me with a heaviness I'd never seen, because he saw things in Marcus even back then. The entitlement, the shortcuts, the hunger. I swallowed hard. Those were the same traits I had spent years denying, explaining away, minimizing. Charles continued, "Your mothering softened him. My father saw it. He knew Marcus might grow up expecting more than he earned." "And you never told me," I whispered. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said simply, "and I hoped Marcus would change." I covered my mouth as tears blurred my vision. "Charles, our son is trying to take our home." "And that," Charles said firmly, "is why you need to understand the last part." He reached into the case again and pulled out one final envelope. The seal was cracked. He had opened it before, but the paper inside was pristine. He handed it to me. I unfolded it slowly. My eyes widened. It was a contingency deed, a document transferring full ownership of the house, all attached land, and all inherited assets solely to Charles, protected by a clause his father had written. A clause triggered the moment anyone attempted to fraudulently access or transfer the property. My breath shook. "So when they tried to forge your signature?" He nodded. "The clause activated." That meant, legally, everything Marcus was trying to steal had already slipped farther from his reach. "But why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, voice breaking. Charles placed a gentle hand on mine. "Because knowing too early could have put you in danger, and because I needed them to reveal how far they were willing to go." His jaw tightened. "Now we know." Silence stretched between us for a moment, heavy but clarifying. "Charles," I whispered, "well, what happens next?" He closed the case, the soft click of metal sounding final. "Next," he said calmly, "we stop being scared." He stood, straightened his shoulders, and walked toward the bedroom door. "We're going to play along," he added. "We let them think we're vulnerable, helpless, confused. And when the moment comes—" He looked back at me, his expression hardening like steel. "We show them exactly who they underestimated." For the first time since the nightmare began, the fear in my chest loosened. Not because the danger was gone. It wasn't. But because now I knew my husband wasn't afraid. He was preparing. And the secret he kept wasn't just power. It was protection. For us. Against our own child. Once Charles closed that black metal case and slid it back into the dresser, something shifted inside me. Not hope, not yet, but direction. A sense that we weren't standing in the dark anymore. We were moving. For the next 2 days, our home felt like a stage. Marcus and Tasha rehearsed their lines, believing they were in control, and Charles and I played our parts, quiet, slow, compliant, while our real work unfolded beneath the surface. The morning after Charles revealed the secret, he suggested we take an early walk. We never took walks that early, but I understood the reason without him having to say it. The walls in our house had ears now. We stepped outside into the cool Virginia morning. The air smelled of wet soil and dew settling over the grass. The sun hadn't fully risen, so our shadows stretched long across the driveway. Once we were far enough from the porch, Charles spoke. "We need proof," he said. "Not just suspicion, not just papers. Proof." I nodded. "We already have the forged signature. That's not enough," he interrupted calmly. "We need their voices, their intent, their plan." My heart thudded. "Recordings?" He nodded once. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small device, black and slim, something I'd never seen him use before. "I bought this the night I noticed the withdrawals," he admitted, and told myself I'd use it only if things got worse. They have. I stared at the device. "Charles, when did you start preparing for this?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We walked along the sidewalk toward the sleepy row of houses lining our street. Miss Loretta was watering her hydrangeas, wearing a robe covered in bright pink flamingos. When she saw us, her brows rose slightly. "You two up early," she called out. Charles gave her a polite nod. "Just getting some fresh air." She tilted her head, studying us, her instincts too sharp to be fooled. I prayed she wouldn't ask more questions. Thankfully, she let it go. Mostly. "Well," she said slowly, "y'all take care? Strange things happening lately?" Her words lingered. Strange things. She had no idea. As we reached the end of the street, Charles finally spoke again. "We'll place the recorder in the hallway vent. They stand there often when they argue. I blinked. You noticed that? I've been noticing everything, he said simply. We spent the rest of the walk planning, quietly, deliberately. In the afternoon, when Marcus left for a meeting and Tasha took a call on the porch, we slipped into motion. I pretended to be dusting. Charles pretended to be searching for an old tool. But in reality, we were installing the small recorder inside the vent near the living room, the one spot where conversations traveled clean and clear through the duct. By dinner, the device was set. That night, everything unfolded faster than we expected. Marcus stormed into the house first, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. "We're running out of time, Tasha," he shouted. Tasha followed behind him, heels clicking. "Then get them to sign, Marcus. Your father is practically half senile already." My pulse flared. Charles stiffened beside me, but we said nothing. We played our roles. I pretended to be startled. Charles pretended to be confused. "Oh, Marcus," I said softly. "Everything all right?" He forced a smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Everything's fine, Ma. Just work stress." Then came the part that made my stomach twist. "We need to review some paperwork with you both," Tasha said sweetly. "Just simple updates." Charles nodded like a man too tired to argue. "Tomorrow." Marcus smirked. Relief, arrogance, maybe both, and said, "Tomorrow is perfect." When they went upstairs, I heard their voices drifting down the hallway, sharp, urgent, tense. Every word fell neatly into the recorder. Later that night, after they both went to bed, Charles retrieved the device. We sat together in the dark living room, the blue glow of the recorder casting an eerie light across his face. He pressed play, and then we heard it. "Tasha, once they sign the transfer, everything's ours." "Marcus, if they don't sign, we'll force it. They can still make it look voluntary." "Tasha, and when they're gone, we sell everything and start over." Gone. Again that word. Tears prickled my eyes. But Charles? Charles was stone. "We have what we need now," he said quietly. "They've incriminated themselves." I wiped my eyes. "Should we go to the police?" "Not yet." He placed a steady hand on mine. "If we go too early, they'll spin it as confusion, misunderstanding, age. We need a moment, a public moment, where they can't lie their way out." His eyes sharpened. The confrontation must be seen, heard, witnessed. My voice trembled. "When?" He exhaled slowly. "Soon." And as I looked at him, my husband, the man I had grown old with, I realized something. I wasn't just married to a quiet man. I was married to a strategist, a man who had waited, watched, and prepared, a man who was done being prey. And for the first time in days, a strange stillness settled inside me. Not calm, not peace, but readiness. We were no longer hiding. We were hunting. The confrontation didn't happen the way I imagined. Not in the kitchen, not in the hallway, not in some quiet moment where truth could sit gently between us. It happened at our granddaughter's birthday party, a day that should have been nothing but cupcakes, plastic princess crowns, and the smell of barbecue drifting through the backyard. A day that should have belonged to joy, but instead, it became the battlefield. Marcus and Tasha insisted on hosting the party at our house, which struck me wrong the moment they suggested it. They wanted the space, the appearance, the neighborhood, the perfect family image, and Charles let them. In fact, he encouraged it. "This is the day," he told me that morning as he buttoned his shirt. His voice was steady, resolute. "As many witnesses as possible. Let them expose themselves." I swallowed hard, hands trembling as I tied my scarf. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Then he touched my cheek gently. "We won't get another chance like this." Family arrived around noon. Cousins, aunts, co-workers, neighbors. The backyard filled with laughter and folding chairs, kids running across the grass, balloons swaying in the warm Virginia breeze. On the outside, everything looked normal. Inside, my heart was a storm. Marcus moved through the crowd charmingly, his fake smile stretching wide as he hugged relatives and took pictures with his daughter on his hip. Tasha buzzed around in a bright yellow dress, greeting people like she'd planned the party out of kindness instead of calculation. But I watched them closely. Their glances, their whispering, the urgency in their gestures. They didn't care about the celebration. They cared about the moment they planned to strike. And they didn't wait long. It was after the cake, right when everyone was still gathered, plates in hand, frosting smeared on kids' faces, that Marcus approached us. "Mom? Dad?" he said in that rehearsed, patient tone. "Could you two step inside for a moment? We need you to sign something real quick." Real quick. Like signing away our future was an errand. The entire backyard swayed for a second as fear spiked through me, but Charles squeezed my hand with small, grounding pressure. "We're ready," he said calmly. As we followed Marcus and Tasha into the living room, I caught sight of Miss Loretta's eyes tracking us from the porch. Suspicious, sharp, watchful, the perfect witness. Marcus closed the living room door behind us and exhaled dramatically, dropping the mask he wore outside. "Okay," he said impatiently. "Let's just get this done." Tasha stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the coffee table. White papers, tabs, stamps, space for signatures. My signature. Charles's signature. She smiled sweetly, but her eyes were cold. "These are the documents for the property transfer. It's just easier if everything is under one household name." Charles cut her off with a raised hand. "No need to explain. We heard the two of you talking." The room froze. Marcus's face drained of color. Tasha's smile stiffened. Charles continued, "We heard everything. The loan, the collateral, the forged signature, the plan to move us into senior living. Every word." My heartbeat thundered. Marcus opened his mouth. "Dad, you must have misheard." "No," I said sharply, surprising even myself. "We heard exactly what you said." Tasha's eyes flicked toward the windows. "We can discuss this privately. No reason to involve." Charles reached into his jacket and placed something on the coffee table. The recorder. The same recorder that held their whispered confessions. Marcus stepped back like it was a bomb. Charles pressed play. Their voices filled the room, ugly, cold, greedy versions of themselves. "Once they sign the transfer, everything's ours. We move them into senior living. If they don't sign, we'll force it." The sound echoed through the house, through the closed door, through the birthday laughter, through every lie they told. When the recording stopped, silence fell heavy. Very heavy. Marcus tried to speak, stuttering. "Dad, it's not, we didn't—" "The forged signature?" Charles said calmly. "We found that too." He slid a photo across the table, a photo he'd taken of the fraudulent document before locking it away in our lawyer's file. Tasha's face contorted. "You don't know what you're doing. That recording won't hold up." "Oh, it's not just recorded," Charles replied. "It's already with our attorney." My breath caught. He hadn't told me that part. Marcus's voice cracked. "Dad, please. You're overreacting." "No," Charles said softly. "I'm responding." You could feel the words strike him like physical blows. Tasha folded her arms, shifting to arrogance. "You have no proof this wasn't taken out of context?" Charles gave a slow smile, small, controlled, deadly. "That's why we invited everyone here." In one swift motion, he opened the living room door. Half the family stood clustered outside, faces shocked, angry, confused. Miss Loretta, my sister Denise, Marcus's co-workers, even little kids peeking around legs. They had heard everything, every single word. Tasha staggered backward. Marcus turned pale. Someone from the doorway whispered, "Lord help us." Another, "After everything they did for you?" The judgment rolled in like a wave, and then Charles delivered the final blow. "Marcus," he said quietly, "we're filing charges. Financial fraud, elder abuse, attempted coercion." Marcus sank onto the couch, face in his hands. "Dad, please, don't do this." But Charles didn't waver. "You did this," he said. "You and her." I felt my knees give out, and I sat slowly, my hands trembling. Not with fear this time, with the weight of release. The truth was no longer trapped inside us. The whole world, or at least the part of it that mattered, finally saw it. Tasha bolted for the door, shoving past relatives, muttering curses. Marcus just crumpled. Outside, the birthday party was silent. No music, no chatter, just the sound of a family breaking clean down the middle. And in that strange, aching quiet, I felt something shift inside me. Not victory, not pride. Just the first inhale of someone who'd been drowning for months without realizing it. Charles closed the living room door gently and turned toward me. "It's done," he said. But it wasn't. Not yet. The legal consequences were coming. The fallout, the arrests, the aftermath. But the confrontation, the truth, the exposure, that part was finally over. And for the first time since the basement door slammed shut above my head, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we were going to be okay. Justice doesn't always arrive with flashing lights. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a door clicking open on a new chapter. 2 days after the birthday party, Justice came to our front porch wearing navy blue uniforms and badges. Marcus wasn't home when the officers arrived. Tasha had already vanished that night, storming off in her lemon yellow dress like she could outrun the truth. But Marcus, he came back. He always came back. That morning, I was sitting at the kitchen table, fingers curled around a cup of peppermint tea that had gone cold. The house was painfully silent, the kind of silence that still holds echoes of what was said and what can never be taken back. When I heard the knock, my breath caught. 3 firm taps, no urgency, but no hesitation. Charles rose slowly and opened the door. 2 officers stood there. One young, one older, both with the kind of practiced calm that made my hands shake even more. "Mr. Johnson?" the older officer asked. "Yes," Charles replied. "We're here regarding the evidence your attorney submitted." Evidence. That one word sent a tremor through my bones, not from fear, but from the weight of what we had carried. "Is your son, Marcus Johnson, in the residence?" Charles shook his head. "He'll be here any minute. He left early this morning." The older officer nodded. "We'll wait." So they waited in on our porch, in the rising Virginia heat, while Charles and I sat inside with the curtains half drawn, letting the minutes drip by like thick syrup. At 9:14 a.m., Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. I felt my heartbeat falter. When he stepped out, he looked tired, the kind of tired guilt carves into a person's face. His eyes flicked toward the porch, confusion spreading when he saw the officers. Can I help you?" he asked, voice cracking. The older officer stepped forward. "Marcus Johnson, we need to speak with you." "About what?" Marcus laughed nervously. "Did I, park wrong or something?" Even then he tried to charm his way out, but this time charm wasn't currency. "Sir," the officer said firmly, "you are being detained for questioning regarding allegations of financial fraud, forgery, and attempted exploitation of vulnerable adults." The words cut through the morning air like a blade. Marcus's face collapsed. No, this is a misunderstanding. Mom, Dad, tell them." He looked at us like we were supposed to save him, like the years of love he'd thrown away could suddenly be cashed back in. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I wasn't the shield he expected anymore. Charles stepped beside me, steady as a mountain. "There is no misunderstanding," he said quietly. Marcus staggered backward. "Dad, please. Dad, I was going to fix it." "You were going to take everything we own," Charles replied, "and you didn't hesitate." For the first time, Marcus didn't have a comeback. His shoulders slumped, his breath hitched. His eyes darted from the officers to us and back again. "Sir," the younger officer said, "please turn around." Marcus didn't fight, didn't run, didn't argue. He turned slowly, hands trembling as the cuffs clicked around his wrists. Tasha was found 2 days later, hiding at her cousin's apartment across town. She faced charges too, maybe harsher ones. I didn't follow the details closely. My heart couldn't take more. The legal process moved quickly after that. The forged documents were undeniable. The audio recordings were damning. The witnesses from the birthday party were plentiful. Our attorney told us the case was strong. I didn't want it to be strong. I wanted it not to exist at all. In the weeks that followed, the house felt different. Quieter, safer, but also lonelier. Some nights I sat on the porch, listening to the cicadas, trying to understand how a child I loved so completely could choose a path so dark. Charles would sit beside me, offering silent company, the kind that doesn't fix everything, but keeps you standing. One evening, as the sky turned soft pink, he said gently, "We didn't fail him." I swallowed hard. "Then why does it feel like we did?" Charles squeezed my hand. "Because you're a mother, and mothers always think love alone can rewrite a person's choices." I let that settle inside me. Justice had been served. Consequences had been delivered. But grief. Grief lingered like smoke after a fire, and yet beneath the grief another feeling began to rise. Slowly, hesitantly. Relief. Relief that we survived. Relief that the truth won. Relief that the home we built with decades of sweat and sacrifice remained ours. Justice didn't heal everything, but it gave us back our lives. And for now, that was enough. In the weeks after Marcus's arrest, the house felt different. Not empty, not broken, just quieter. The kind of quiet that lets old wounds breathe. The first morning after everything happened, I woke up before the sun. The air was still, the house cool, and Charles was already sitting at the kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee. Mine had extra cream, just how I liked it. He didn't say anything, but the way he slid the cup toward me felt like a promise. We survived. We keep going. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear tightening around my ribs. I spent the days cleaning corners of the house I hadn't touched since Marcus and Tasha moved in, wiping away dust, rearranging furniture, opening windows wide enough for sunlight to flood in. I wasn't trying to erase them. I was reclaiming us. Our home. Every photo, every creaking floorboard, every notch in the banister Charles carved, fixing the stairs last winter. They belonged to our story long before Marcus tried to rewrite it. Some afternoons, I'd sit on the porch swing and watch the maple leaves rustle. The same tree Marcus climbed when he was 8, the same tree that held our Christmas lights every December. The memories still came, but they didn't cut as sharply. Pain softened, slowly, like fabric losing its stiffness in warm hands. One day, Miss Loretta stopped by with a pie she claimed she baked just for comfort, though I suspected she really came for the update. "How you holding up, honey?" she asked gently. I told her the truth. "I'm hurt, but I'm here." She patted my hand. "Being here counts." Her words sat with me long after she left, because she was right. Sometimes survival looks like strength. Sometimes it looks like just getting out of bed. Charles healed differently. He became quieter, more reflective. Some mornings I'd find him sitting on the edge of the porch, staring at the yard like he was searching for something invisible. I asked once what he was thinking about. He said, "How close we came." I knew what he meant, how close we came to losing our home, our safety, our dignity, each other. I sat beside him, resting my head against his shoulder. "We didn't lose," I whispered. He covered my hand with his. "No, we didn't." And in that moment I realized something important. We hadn't just survived our son's betrayal. We had survived the crushing belief that we were powerless. We weren't. We never were. The meaning came slowly, like dawn easing over the horizon. I learned that love doesn't prevent betrayal, and betrayal doesn't erase love. Both can live in the same heart, tangled and painful, but they don't define your worth or your future. I learned that age doesn't make you weak. Wisdom is its own kind of armor, and I learned that sometimes the family you lean on isn't the one you raised. It's the one that stays standing beside you when truth breaks everything open. Like Charles, like our neighbors, like the cousins who refused to look away. I didn't get back the son I used to have, but I got back myself. And that was the beginning of healing. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the evening light settles soft across the living room floor, I think back to that night in the basement. The cold air, the locked door, the whisper of my husband's voice. Quiet. I have a secret. I didn't know then that his secret wasn't darkness. It was protection. It was preparation. It was the strength he held on to while I was falling apart. And now, after everything, the lies, the recordings, the confrontation, the aftermath, I've come to understand something I wish I'd known years ago. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is defined by loyalty. By who stands with you, by who guards your safety when you don't know danger is walking your hallways, by who holds your hand when your heart is breaking and keeps holding it even after. Marcus may have been our son by birth, but Charles was my partner in survival. The house feels lighter now, safer, ours again. I sit on the porch some evenings watching the sun dip behind the maple tree, feeling the quiet settle into my bones. Not the heavy kind, the healing kind. The kind that tells you the storm has passed, even if the sky still remembers the rain. And if there's one lesson my story carries, it's this. Trust isn't owed, trust is earned, even with family, especially with family. If you're listening to this right now and you've been through something that shook you, something that made you question the people closest to you, you're not alone. Drop a comment if you've ever had to stand up to someone you loved. Share your story if betrayal taught you something you never wanted to learn. And if this touched you, even a little, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Because sometimes the stories we share are the ones that save us.